Good morning, and you're very welcome to this lesson on Enterprise University. I hope everybody's well, and I look forward to diving into production today on today's lesson. So if it's your first time, as always, to join us, you're very, very welcome. And this session, of course, is being recorded and will be made available later on today on our website through the university page. So without further ado, let me share with you today's lesson, the overview of what we will cover off. And I will also just do a quick review of what it is that we covered on the previous lesson as well. So let me start by sharing my screen. So this is, if you've been with me on the journey of the university since last year, since October, we are now on to module 8 for production. So just a reminder of exactly where we've come from. These are all the modules that we've covered off to date. And as I've confirmed, you can get access to any of the recordings on our website. So if you check out www.enterpryze.com, click on the resources page and then into Enterprise University, you'll have access to all the previous recordings. So we're nearly towards the end. So at module 8 for production, and obviously still more to come around expenses and of course around tips and tricks around using reporting and grids within the platform. So today's lesson, what it is we're going to cover off. So just a full production overview, exactly what it is that you can do within the production module within Enterprise. We will look at the settings that are required, so any settings that you need to switch on or enable for the users in order for those users to see the required information. We will look at the production process itself, the flow from production orders through to planning, and of course to look at stock replenishment, because of course that's important that we understand the demand that's going to be required during the production process. We will also look at the planning for production, so how you can plan and schedule those in through the resource planner. So you can ensure that, for example, the right engineer, the right warehouse, the right machinery, and that those production orders are allocated on the right days to the right routes or users that you require. We also have the ability to pick production orders. So again, it's a very useful one for similar to what we do already around picking sales orders and reserve invoices, that you can allocate production orders to be picked. So for those orders that are ready within the warehouse, that they can be then picked and then assigned for delivery to customers, or perhaps they just need to be moved to another area within the warehouse. And then production day itself. So what actually happens when you make the product? How can you make the product? Where can that be done within the platform? So I'll show you some simple ways that you can tackle that directly through the production order itself or directly from the item master details itself. And in fact, you can also make bill of material items from other transactions within the system. We will also look at the reporting that's available. And as always, we'll do a live demonstration around a lot of these processes, particularly around adding the production order, being able to run the MRP, obviously schedule that through the resource planner, and then to actually make the final product itself. So just a quick review on lesson 7. So what it is that we looked at on the previous lesson. And this was all in relation to the stock transactions. You will see that we will touch base today in particular on lesson 6, which was around your stock management. We will touch base on the bill of materials, which was the type of stock item that was introduced to you on lesson 6. So we would refer to that again, of course, if this is something that you've already missed so far. So we looked at where transactions impact your solution. So we looked at the GL account postings and of course what that means in terms of incrementing or decreasing stock and what actually happens when a goods receipt or a goods issue is put in to the system. And that's going to be important as well today on the basis of understanding the whole production process, because we do something quite similar once we make a bill of material item, and once that's been complete, what happens on the production history? So the impact on the stock. So the increase of the bill of material item itself, and of course, the decrease of the raw materials or the components out of stock as a result of the production process. We also looked at a detailed look at the different transaction types. We looked at picking stock. We did a demonstration of goods in, goods out, stock transfer and stock take. We looked at the different stock reports. There's multiple different stock reports available. So whether that's through the PDF menu or directly on screen itself. So do take a look at those and be familiar with them. We also did a detailed look at each of those reports and how to use them, the best time to use those reports. We just did a quick overview on omni-channel selling and going mobile with the Sell app. So if you've missed that lesson, as I said, that's available on the website then to watch back at your leisure. So let's take a look at today's overview. So the production overview, obviously in terms of production. Production can potentially be, a complex process depending on a requirement within your business and organization. Because for some companies, it does require multiple levels of BOMs. So that's where you have multiple steps and stages that have to be gone through in order to produce the actual final product. So bill of materials, as we confirmed back in lesson 6, they can be made up of obviously different products, and their course can be multi-level BOMs, and that's bill of materials within a bill of materials, but they in themselves can represent the different stages of manufacturing or the different stages of building out the final product. Or it can be incredibly simple. You can just have a one-level bill of material that this is something that you make and produce, for example, and that there's no need to have other steps within that bill of material. Just to make you aware of all of the WISE apps, and again, this is something that I would have introduced you to between module 6 and 7, that we do have WISE apps that enable you to analyze those BOMs or to analyze the bill of materials and the requirements needed, particularly around where you have complex processes, where you have multi-level BOMs with different stages, how you can review those using the WISE app to understand the requirements within that particular multi-level bill of material. So looking here at the production itself within the platform, we have a couple of settings around what you need to do to enable the production. So there are production steps around each of the users that you have to enable, obviously switch on or switch off. There are other considerations as well on the settings, which I will show you on one of the slides, just to consider as well around the item definitions. So whether you have the reordering tab filled out as well in terms of reordering quantities for fulfillment. And that's important around using the MRP going forward to ensure that you are reordering to the right quantities, the minimum stock or maximum stock levels. This is something that we've also extended on a previous release with the maximum stock levels or with the minimum stock levels to ensure that particularly fast-moving components and fast-moving raw materials are accounted for and not missed for fast-moving stock, and particularly around the MRP. Production orders. So this really is production order, effectively is adding production order for the bill of material item for each stage of the manufacturing process. So that's the idea around a production order. So this is your stage for manufacturing. So you would select the bill of material item, and of course it's going to show up all the different components, or potentially if there are multi-levels of bill of materials, what they are. And of course for each stage of the production process, you should have a production order in place to cover that. Then of course the MRP. So we utilize this to restock and to ensure that we have minimum stock levels, maximum and minimum stock levels for raw materials. And we also enable you to use it for bill of materials as well. So you can generate production orders from the MRP, running off the bill of material items, or simply just to generate fulfillment around raw materials or components needed within the production process. So we'll see that again when we come to the live demonstration. Then there's the production scheduling. So then we move on to being able to schedule the production stages. So in the resource planner, so for example, if you're utilizing, users or routes, and those routes of course could be your machinery. So maybe you've defined a route or a user as a machine and you want to make sure that the right production orders are allocated to the right machine on the right day. Utilizing the resource scheduler will give you a visual overview of what's been scheduled for that machine on any given day or any given week so that you can plan ahead for your production. And then of course the picking element there, which is where you can assign production orders to a picking list, for example. The purpose of the actual picking itself will be to bring that into our WMS, which is our warehouse management system, the handheld, where you can then go and ensure that the components are picked and maybe dropped off at the production machine, wherever they are required to ensure that they are ready then for the production process. So next up, just to show you here, the production menu. So everything is done through a specific production menu. This is something that we introduced last year. So you can manage everything within the production menu, from the orders. You can review the bill of material item master details. You can have a look at all item master details as well within the production menu. So if you want to just take a quick check on a raw material, for example, you can run the MRP. We've got the resource planning, which can also be accessed directly from the production menu, and of course, the picking. So it's just bringing everything for you just into one area within the platform so that you don't have to keep moving around and going into items, for example, to check on stock items or components or even bill of material items, but you can do it all within one area within this platform. So let's start with just looking at what settings are required. So when we look at a user permission, for example, we have all the different modules laid out within a user permission. So this is in your settings menu and into user settings. So there is a production option there where you have to enable that. So this is where you're giving a user access to processing production orders, reviewing the BOM report, utilizing the production resource planning. And of course, there's other considerations which I've mentioned below because they are important. So access to items. If somebody is going to be utilizing the production, you have to consider, do they have access to all stock items, not just read-only? Do they require updates to the items themselves, or is it on a read-only basis? Item reordering. This is something that we give to you in the items user settings. So the item reordering and the MRP are interlinked because the two options are quite similar, although the MRP is advanced in that we're looking at our basis for our components required for production, as well as bill of materials that are already within the production process. So you have to consider other user settings that are applicable to that user as well. So make sure that they do have access to items, that they can see and use item reordering so that they can see the MRP. And of course, if they're able to assign a picker, again, that's another user permission if you want them to utilize the picking tab within the production module. So just some considerations when you're setting this up within your organization. So I'm just going to do a quick reminder of a bill of material item. This is something we touched on in Module 6, and this is just to remind us all what it is a bill of material item is and what it contains. So it's very simply, it is a component list of a finished item. So we've got a production item. These are the raw materials that make up that production item. Nice and simple. And it's made up of a quantity of each of those items that are required. There can be an added manufacturing cost, as always, so we can apply multiple or single cost of labor. The cost price of the components make up the finished item cost price, so that's important to remember. Making a finished item depletes the stock, so it depletes the raw material. So that's where we flush out the components. So when we make a final product or make a production item, it will flush out the components and raw materials, and of course it will increase the production item or the bill of material item into stock. There are multiple margin calculations. Again, if you were there on Module 6, you would have seen that on the Bill of Materials tab in the Item Master Details. We'll probably look at that really quickly again today during the live demonstration. I will reference that again so that you're aware of where that exists. Production orders, of course, as we said, can be planned and added for Bill of Material items. BOMs can deplete from different warehouses. Okay, so this is where you might have multi-level bill of materials, but your components might also be in different warehouses as well and different locations within the warehouses. So they can deplete from the required areas. And of course, as we said from the very beginning, they can be part of a multi-level BOM. So here's just a very simple BOM that we're actually going to use today. We're going to work on the red bike for production. And as you can see here, it's just a very simple bill of material. We've got the bicycle, which is our bill of material item. That's our finished item. And then we've got the simple layer of components or raw materials. And of course, all of those are ultimately stock items. Components, of course, can be non-stock items as well. But of course, as part of the production process, when we make our final product, that's where it will deplete all of the raw materials, take out the two wheels, take out the one frame, the handlebars, etc. And of course, it will increment the finished item into stock as part of the production process. So just a very simple way to look at that. So let's take a look at what the production order actually is. So production orders, very simply, you add a production order for a bill of material item. We give a lot of information to you at header level in particular on the production order once it's been added into the system, such as the stock levels. Quite similar to what you see when you drill in to look at any stock item currently now within your items menu. You get a lot of information at the very top of the screen on the item details to tell you what's free, what's available, available to make if it's a bill of material item. So this gives us something similar as well on the stock level details at the very top of our production order. So even as a result of adding the production order, we get informed of the free stock, what's available to make, if there's any outage in terms of raw materials. So based on current components for this bill of material item, what can I actually produce and what can I make? So even then at this point, without even having to go into MRP, I have an indicator that I have a fulfillment issue, for example, to complete this production run. So of course, that will bring you on, of course, down into MRP to run the MRP to ensure that we have enough fulfillment on the raw materials to complete production. So raw materials as well, this is the nice thing about the production order, raw materials can be swapped out. So for example, flexibility there with the production order. If you have a static bill of material item, but in fact there's something extra that you need to add on for a particular production run, you can add more components directly onto the production order screen itself. Production costs can be added as well. So we mentioned there that as part of the bill of material item, you have or can manage manufacturing costs or production costs. But you can also add those on to the production order. Perhaps, again, it might be a special production run and maybe it's a new machinery and you've got extra costs around that to ensure maybe there's 2 engineers required and it's going to cost you more to do that particular production run. You can add that on at this point in time directly onto the production order itself. The production order as well, of course, you're always going to be putting in the planned quantities, planned dates. You can also assign it to a customer. And again, maybe this is being done specifically for a particular customer and you want to make sure that you've got a record of who that's for. So that can also be added in against the production order. You can allocate the root user. So the root user is simply who the user is, whether that's an engineer or somebody within the manufacturing process, or perhaps the root user is a machine that you've defined as a user within the platform. So that can be allocated to a machine, to a person, but these are things that you can decide are part of your process and your steps for the manufacturing within Enterpryze. We've got a progress bar to see the status. So when the production order was created, when it's planned, if it's run over, all of the above. So we got a status bar running across the top. You can set a status. So when it's pending, when it's been planned, when it's been completed, all of the above, or when it's in progress. So there's different statuses as well. You can follow. So there's got the notification there as well. You can follow a production order to see as it progresses through the production process. We can also populate custom fields as we can with all the transactions within the platform. So again, if there's anything specific that you need to store against that production order to record against it for purposes of data, use the custom fields. If nothing exists outside of the standard fields, use the custom fields to ensure that you've captured that information. And of course, as always, there's other actions and options that you can take against the actual production order itself, but ultimately there is a make button. And of course, once production is complete, you can make the final product, which will receive in that item, the finished item, and will deplete, automatically flush out the components for the stock items. So just to show you there, it was just highlighting the top bar where you've just got so much information that you can already see against the production order itself. And I'll show you that, of course, as always, during the live demonstration. So just to go through it here, I think we spoke about all of this on the previous slide. The production order itself, the customer, you have a link then to the customer account. We can see here the status of the production order here at the top. So the same as we can do on all of our transactions. We can follow, we can search, there are actions we can make, we can create a new order. And of course, when the production order is in progress, the make button will appear. At the moment, this particular order is only pending. So until I progress this, I can't actually finalize or make my final production order. We've got the stock information that I mentioned, giving you information around the kind of stock that's available, what's committed to customers, what's available to sell, what you can produce based on current components. So if that of course is a minus amount, that's going to indicate already that we've got a fulfillment issue around the production itself. We've also got the planning information, when the production order was created, when it's planned for, the planned date, and other information here around the quantity, of course the root user, so that could be the machine as I've mentioned already, the status, so where it currently sits in relation to the production process, and of course additional costs sit there as well. There's a value for that if that exists. And of course we have our custom fields, and of course we have the planned bill of materials. And we say planned bill of materials because we've mentioned already that could be just your static bill of materials, but you may have added on an additional component or process within that particular production for this particular production process. We have lots of things as well that you can check on once the production order has been added and you're back on the production order grid itself. We have lots of clickables. Remember that with all the grids, we have the purple clickables that give you more information. So another thing that we do here is we report on the cost lines. So as well as the production order details, there is a cost lines clickable. So this will give me an indication of how many lines, manufacturing lines of costs that I have within the production order. And I can click in to see what those costs are, for example, labor or machine or perhaps an engineer, whatever that is in relation to your process. We also have a clickable for component lines. So this will just simply give you a list of all the components allocated to that production order. So without even having to drill into the production order, I get a lot of information directly from the production grid itself. And there's lots more we'll be able to do as well. You could probably see there just to the right of the components, there is a column there for planned start date and planned end date. And in fact, that works brilliantly with our resource planning. We can actually plan a production order directly from the grid itself without even having to go into the resource planner. So again, I'll show you all of that once we get to the live demonstration. Just introducing lots of quick access to information to save you having to drill in further to get that information. Let's move on then to MRP and what that's going to mean for you, of course, around restocking your components, for example. So the purpose of MRP really is when we look at the stock items or the components, it will allow you to generate purchase orders to maintain stock levels. So if we look at the production orders that are currently in place at the moment, we go into our MRP, we ask it to consider current committed components on production orders because we want to see, do we have sufficient stock to proceed with the production process? And of course, that's going to show us where we have levels, for example, free stock, if it's down in minus, or in stock quantities, for example, in minus levels. We can quickly identify where we have outages in stock and then, of course, generate the required purchase orders at that point in time to ensure that we have stock in time. Now, of course, the time to reorder the stock is not when you need it. The time to reorder the stock is prior to when we need it. We all know that from a fulfillment perspective. So the MRP can be run at any time to check for stock levels. So you might even know at this point in time, there's a big production run coming up, for example, at the start of March. And in fact, there's perhaps maybe a couple of component items that you know are very fast moving and you know that the lead time, for example, on those particular items generally is 2 weeks and you're going to be ordering that stock now, in fact, even before now to ensure that that's in stock and available for the production process before it begins. Just to make you aware, because of course I'm mentioning a lot of aspects there around fulfillment and particularly around lead times on fulfillment. That is something we are looking at improving and implementing this year around lead times in stock and the expected lead times from your suppliers. So that can improve the visibility around when you should be ordering stock from your suppliers. There's something else as well that we introduced on the last release, which was around maximum stock levels, reorder quantity, the reorder level to maximum stock levels. And this was, or to minimum stock levels, apologies, because this was to cater for fast moving stock, where fast moving stock is coming through the system and is reaching minimum stock level too quickly. How do we counteract that? So we've brought in another level, a reorder level on the MRP and on the item reordering screen to ensure that you can review that minimum stock levels to ensure that any of that fast moving stock is fulfilled on time. So let me just remind you about the MRP and what it is that it can do. So as I've mentioned, you can restock items in bulk through the creation of purchase orders for raw materials. It can also be done for bill of materials. We can create production orders in bulk for bill of material items. So you could do an MRP run for components, ensure that that stock is there. And if sufficient stock, then you could select a certain product group or run for production through the MRP and then create production orders based on those requirements for the finished items as well. So to save you doing the manual production order entries. So I've mentioned already, we can provide a suggested reorder quantity based on minimum, maximum stock levels, in-stock quantity, what's committed and on order from your suppliers, but also in relation to what's committed and on order or ordered for production, so committed for production. So we'll be able to see that actually as part of the live demonstration today around our bike. And we can also, permissions can be assigned. So this is the permissions that I mentioned, one of the considerations around assigning permissions for the user in the purchases module to gain access to the restock option. Okay, so in user settings, under purchasing, there is a user setting for the restock option if you need somebody to see the MRP option. Okay, and then the other one there, of course, is that we can, let's just have a look here at the demonstration. So when we go to select the item type, so there's two options here. We can run it for stock items, so our bill of material, our raw materials, or we can run it for bill of materials. In the filter section, you can choose your filters based on, for example, product group, destination warehouse, reorder to the minimum, maximum reorder quantity, for example. And then we have the different stock levels. So the different stock levels, so whether there's committed stock on order or sales orders, on POs, or those are committed to production already, we can switch that on as well. So if we need to identify components that are already committed to production so that we have sufficient stock to cover all those already committed to production, plus what we're trying to cater for in a planned production process in the coming weeks, for example. And again, as with the item reordering screen, you can enter the reorder quantity, assign the route user, and of course then select the relevant items to reorder. So the route selection here, the route user selection is when we're running the MRP, for example, for the bill of material items. If we're running it for stock items or components, we will see the supplier selection because that's where it's going to create the bulk production or purchase orders for those particular items. So we'll see that again during the live demonstration just to make sense of all the different options that are available on the screen. So there you can see create your production orders for BOMs or for stock items, raw materials, you'll be creating purchase orders. And that's the options that will instantly come up on screen when you're ready to process. So production scheduling. So what does that mean? So this is your way of putting those productions then into production and scheduling those in the diary and creating the visibility around the different engineers or different route users. And those route users might be machines. So you might have machine 1, 2, and 3. So just relating to let's say the production area within the warehouse. And you might have 3 specific machines as part of that, and you have to allocate then the production orders to those different route users. And then you can see visibly on the scheduler, on the resource planner for each of those routes or for each of those users, exactly what has been scheduled in for production over the coming days or weeks. So for example, you might have part of the production process, of course, is producing the finished item, and then maybe stage 2 of the production process might be to test and ensure that that particular product comes up to, might be just to check that that's up to scratch. There might be another area that actually has to go to. So you might see on the production calendar, so from Monday to Friday is the production process. Next Monday then is a review of those items, and then Tuesday then might be to come back for packing or whatever. So you can see where they've moved through the different users, but see it visibly then on the scheduler as well. So what we can do here, this is just showing you here very visibly on the resource planning, schedule those production orders, select the users, machines or routes that I've mentioned, choose from different or multiple calendar types. So choose what suits you. This is something we're making changes and updates to all of the time. I personally like the timeline view. Everybody's different. The timeline view tends to give the whole day, if you're looking at the day or the week in timeline slots. And of course, you can decide on the size of those timeline views as well. So whether they're in half-hour, 1 hour, 2 hour slots, so whatever way you need to see that visibly across the screen. There's something else that we're introducing as well, being able to increase the column width on the timeline view as well. That's something that's actually coming in the next release. You can select the working hours. So this is again part of the resource planner itself. You can decide the colors, so you can customize it. So the different colors, you might have a specific color for the different process or for the different stages within the production process. So you can decide what those filters are, what those colors are, what the working hours are. You very simply just drag and drop the orders to the calendar. You can change the time as needed, so simply through a drag and drop. And in fact, even if you hover over the item that you've scheduled, you can drag the end of it if you need to extend the production. Maybe production was aimed at Monday to Friday, but in fact, it's going to go into next week now as a result of perhaps there was a resource issue, or perhaps there was an issue with the machine on the day and a part had to be brought in to replace it. So you've had to extend out the production process perhaps into next week. So all of the above can be considered during the scheduling process. So we have specific colors here which are already in place, but you can change those if you like. Green, the order is open, and red, the order is complete. The green is the tip that you see on the top of the order once it's been placed in the scheduler, and then red, of course, will show once that's been completed. So just to show you here, that's where it resides currently within the production menu itself. Again, we'll look at this during the live demonstration just to make sense of it coming through. So production planning, what can we do in terms of the resource planner? So I did mention that your employee selection, this doesn't have to be a list of employees. This could be your users, it could be your machines, it could be your routes, but they do have to be defined as a user. So if you've decided, so I've given you an example there of we have a user, but we've got a workshop area 1 and a workshop area 2, for example. So they do have to exist as users within the platform in order for you to see them here for selection. So if these were machines, we would have to see them here as a user so that you can allocate the production orders to that machine. Then you can choose the calendar view that best suits your business model. So this, as I said, play around with the different views to find out which one best suits you. I do like the timeline one, but I'm not being biased to that. Obviously, check out all the different views. You might find that a weekly view might look better for you, depending on how you schedule all of the production runs. Select the working hours. So when you select your calendar view, which you can see here just on the timeline view, start and end times for the calendar view. So is it from 7 in the morning till 5 in the evening? There's no production after that. So set those views as well for set the start and end times for the different views that you're using. The cell duration that I mentioned. So do I see it in half-hour slots, an hour? In this case, it's 2-hour slots. Row height. So this is how much information. Perhaps you might have on one particular area, for example, on production. You might have an overlap on production, and maybe that's maybe a different stage on the production itself where you might want a couple of people to review a couple of different production orders at the one time. So the height is just going to show you what production orders have been allocated to that particular time frame. So particularly where you have multiple orders, you can just increase the height so that you can see all of those orders listed for yourself on screen. So as I said, play around with those just to familiarize yourself with customizing the view and making it work better for you. So you can also schedule it directly from the grid. And I mentioned this on a previous slide that beside where we had the cost lines and the component lines, there's a planned start date. So this is another great quick access that even without going into the resource planner, we can look at our production order grid. We can quickly see at a glance, looking at the planned start dates, which orders have or haven't yet been planned for production. And even if they have a planned start date, you can click on that to see, well, does it exist yet on the resource planner? Now, when we click on one here, you can see there, if it does exist on the resource planner, you will see the planned start date and time, end date and time, and the root user. If it doesn't, you will get an extra option, which I'll show you again during the live demonstration, where you'll be able to open the resource planner and assign it directly to the resource planner and save it. So it makes it very easy for you to visually see directly from the grid exactly what hasn't yet been planned out. And last but not least is picking for production. So this just allows you to assign production orders to a pick list. So the idea here is really that if there are components that need to be picked from other areas within your warehouse or within your production area, so if you need to get those picked off the shelf and ready for production, that you can assign production orders to be picked in the warehouse and give that to somebody. They need to go off into the warehouse and ensure that that stock is picked and ready then for production. This is something we will bring in line with using the WMS handheld as well. So that is to come yet in being able to pick the production orders from the handheld. So somebody will be able to go to the shelf and go to the location and go to that particular aisle and pick the relevant components to ensure that they have it. So for now, you could generate a list, you could export it to Excel, print that off, and somebody can just go off and go, okay, I'm going to need to pick up that stock and make sure it's in the production process area or the production area for 9 o'clock in the morning, for example, to make sure that that's kicked off on time. So just a quick demonstration here. So in the picking tab, you can select production orders for picking. Then you can simply select the orders you want to pick from the list by just ticking those, and then of course assign those then to a picker. Okay, and of course there's more options on the grid to export to Excel or to, and to generate that then as the report to pick those particular items. So here you can see the pick status is when you've actually allocated something to be picked, it says that the pick status is now updated to pick, and the picker has also been updated with your selection on the screen as well. There is a Wise panel as well, and in fact, this is the picking column that you can see on the production orders tab. So this is just another clickable. So through your column chooser, you can also pull in the picker directly from the column chooser onto the production orders grid. And you can also assign a picker directly from the production orders grid itself. So another quick access option directly from the grid. I'll remind you about all of these during the live demonstration because obviously there's lots of information, but it's always important to remember that all these Wise panels, they're there for good reason, and they're there to give you quick access to information that's important to you at the time, rather than having to go drilling in to find out where everything resides. So this is the Picking Wise panel that launches when you click on that particular field within the production order grid itself. So just some initial settings. I'm just bringing you back because I did mention about some considerations on the original settings. There is settings here. So this is our settings, user settings, where you can assign pick. So that's the one here for assigning the picker under items. So settings, user settings, and then assign pick for assigning the picker. So I just wanted to show you that there as well. So what do we do next? We've reached the end. So we've scheduled the production. Production is now complete. Review of the stock is now complete. So I'm happy to receive this into stock. So I've got a full item. What happens next? So the production order, as you can see, is still open. And because we've progressed this particular production order, it's no longer pending. It's in progress. And we are now ready to finalize the item. So what we get here at the very top of the production order screen itself, we get a make button. So this make button works exactly the same as it does from your bill of material item master details, in that it will make the final product. And what that does is it receives in the bill of materials item into stock, and then it depletes the raw materials, so issues out the components. So this is the Wise panel that will launch when you click on the make button. Very similar to what you've seen already on, for example, if you were to make the product on a sales order or make it directly from your item master. So you can see there the finished item, the quantity that you're going to make. And of course, very important, if there are any batch or serialized items as part of the components, you can, of course, or perhaps the bill of material item itself is batch or serialized, you can assign those batch numbers and serial numbers now before that is received into stock. In fact, it won't allow you to complete it until all of those have been assigned to all of the relevant stock items. Another great thing here is the information that it gives you on screen. So it's telling me as well the maximum quantity available to make based on current raw material fulfillment. So based on what's available for all the raw materials, I can make 401 of this particular item. So you can see there which warehouse to make it to. So this is where it's going to be received into stock. So where are you placing the final product? If there was additional costs in the production order, they will also be noted here. And of course, once you click on the final make button, it will then receive that into stock and deplete the raw materials. The other option, of course, is you can make directly from the stock item screen, which we all are aware of to date if you're already using bill of material items. So on the stock item screens, that's in items and the item master screen. When you click into the bill of materials tab, you can see here against the item, it'll give you the make button as well. But it makes complete sense to use it against production if that's the process that you're using to produce the items itself. And of course, again, the same as before, what warehouse to make it to, the quantity, any additional costs, and of course, you have the make button. We also have that make button, I'm only showing you exactly where that make button is because it does pop up in a couple of different places. We also have it on the side on a Wise panel in sales orders. So if we were selling this to a customer and there wasn't sufficient stock, you can also make a bill of material item directly from a sales order. Obviously not something you're going to do generally as part of the production process, but I wanted to make you aware of where that make button comes in to play across the platform. And again, you can see there, it's very similar to the previous Wise panel as well. Okay, ultimately, when everything is complete, you're going to use the resource planner again, of course, to ensure that you have given your bill of material over to your customer. So this is where you're going to schedule it in then for delivery. And that's all done through the resource planning as well. So just extending the functionality of the resource planner, not only is it utilized for production, we know that you can allocate it for your sales orders, your deliveries, and in fact, your services as well. So we can ensure then that after the production order has been complete and we've made that production process, if that's linked to a specific customer and then that's linked to a specific sales order, that we can ensure that we get delivery out to the customer in a timely fashion. So once we know the product is ready, we can schedule delivery and ensure the customer then is in receipt of the product. We've also got some availability on production history and production reporting. This is something that you get access to directly in the item master itself, which is the production history. This is something we are actually improving. We are going to bring the production history to the production menu this year. So what that means is that when you have to click into a stock item, then click into the production history to see exactly what has taken place in the past. So what issues and receipts have taken place against this particular bill of material item and the relevant components. So what it shows you in the production history is the raw materials that were issued, the final product that's been received, the finished item prices, so the cost prices as a result of the finished item being receipted into stock, the raw materials cost, the margins, and you can select from the different margin types on screen, the additional costs, so any additional manufacturing costs such as labor or machine costs, for example, they can also be seen here on the production history. So when we bring this into your production menu, which we will do this year, this is something that is actually going to be in development for this year, you'll be able to get access to the production history directly within the production module itself. So again, to save you a step to go back to the items to review this information. So that's one part of analysis to see exactly what's taken place on a production item. We obviously have a lot of different stock reports. I'm not going to go through exactly what all of these are, but just a reminder, these are all the reports that we reviewed back in Module 7. So we have the stock report. So it's an overall, an overview of all your stock item types and where they're available. So you can get quick access to that in the production module itself. We've got the stock posting report, details all postings for stock items. So stock in, stock out. And of course, you'll be able to see that as well for the raw materials and bill of material items. Stock valuation, to value the stock. Batch reports, very important where we've got items that have been batch tracked. And of course, for serial items as well. And of course, there are selection reports available within the PDF. I went through all of these in detail in the previous module, but of course these are all still important around the production process because particularly around stock movements and the value of the stock that we've received in, that you can see exactly where everything has happened and all the different movements on the stock items. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly jump in to do a live demonstration of the production process. I'm going to quickly add a production order and look at the MRP to replenish raw materials. We might just even do that first just to have a look at what that looks like, but we'll also put in a production order so we can see that around it. We will look at resource planning to schedule that production order and of course ultimately then to make the final product. So let me just share my screen with you. Switch over here now to the live system and share that with you. Great. Okay, let me just maximize the screen so you can see it all there all together. So here we have the production menu. So this is where everything resides in relation to production. So we have the orders that I mentioned. We have bill of materials. And bill of materials actually is just simply a quick access to all of your bill of material items in one listing. So rather than having to go back into items and then to look at the list of all the bill of material items or those finished products, that you can see and get a quick access to all of your finished items. The one that we're going to focus in on today, in fact, is going to be the lovely red bike. So in fact, if I just dive into the red bike here itself, just to bring you back a little step to the item details and just to show you and relate the information that we've just looked at on the slides. So when we look at the item master detail itself, we have obviously all of the information here in relation to stock availability. This, by the way, again, is something that we are going to improve over the coming releases as well, particularly around the stock in hand, committed stock. We're going to display more information for you that will be very relevant around the production process. But up here at the very top of the screen is something that tells you straight away your stance in relation to fulfillment of this particular final product. It tells me that there's 12 in stock with 13 already committed to customers, which means we've got a negative -1 to sell. So free stock is -1. There are 5 on production orders, and it's already telling me you can create -13 based on current raw material availability. So already I can see that I can't put any further productions in. I need to get stock in. I need to receive stock in quickly to fulfill any future production process. And that's even without even going into MRP. So just to come down here, just to the bill of materials tab, I can see the different components. I can see the quantity required from each of those components, the warehouses for each of those components and where they reside, the cost price, and I can also see the current available stock for those raw materials. So I'm getting a lot of information just by looking at the item master itself. If I go here to the production history, if this item had been previously produced and made, I can drill in to see exactly what happened. I can see the issue for production. That's the issue for production for the raw materials, and the receipt from production for the final product itself. And I can drill in to see the details for that. There was no additional costs for that particular one. I can see the quantity that was produced at the time was 4. Remarks, that just shows you, created from goods issue 22. Additional costs at the time was actually 12, but obviously it wasn't added in as a manufacturing cost. It might have just been a manual cost when the final product was made at the time, and of course the linked journal. So lots of information already on screen about the item, and that's just in the item details. So let's just go back a step. Let's go back to our production menu. So that's our bill of materials tab. We also have an items tab, which gives you quick access to all your components, or all items in fact. So we don't just have to look at the red bike, we can see all components. So this actually just literally brings us back to the stock menu itself. So if I wanted to review a particular item and just double check on it, that's just a quick access button to get me back there. So let's just go back a step again. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with creating a production order. Let's just do that to start with. So we kick off here the process, go new production order, and I'm going to select my red bike that I mentioned. So this is just keeping with a simple BOM, a simple bill of material. It's a one-level bill of material, doesn't have additional steps. I'm just going to keep it simple for the purpose of the demonstration. I'm going to say that it's going to go into the general warehouse. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to say the planned quantity is 1. I'm just going to keep that simple for now. I can see the status is pending. Now, owner is myself because I'm the logged in user, and then the root user. So this is where you can get specific around your process. So this can be, is it for an engineer or a user to complete the job, or is it, for example, around a particular machine or area of production, and that might be set as a particular username or root. So this is what you select here at this point. The production order date, so that will automatically default to today's date, and I'm going to put in a due date. Well, in fact, I've told the customer I'll have it ready for the beginning of March, so I'm going to put in there for the 2nd of March. I'm also going to say who the customer is because I want to make sure that I follow up and deliver the items to that particular customer. And of course, my planned date. Now I can leave that blank at this point in time, or I can put in a planned date if I want. I'm going to leave it empty because we can see it then on the grid where we can pick that up and plan it in then for the resource scheduler. We come on down then to the custom fields. So if I have important additional information, I can populate it at this point in time as well. And if I scroll on down, we have, very similar to what we just saw in the item master details, we have the bill of materials tab. So this is automatically populated with all of those components that are part of this particular BOM. If I want to add on additional, that I mentioned already, additional components, I can do so. So I can make this particular production run specific to requirements. Production costs. So I can see here I have a production cost already assigned to this particular bill of material. I can change it. I can edit the line. I can increase the value. I can add another line on, for example, if I wish. So this can all be interchanged as and when you require. We have some remarks and comments similar to what you see in all the transactions throughout Enterprise. And all I'm going to do now is simply save that production order. Default warehouse. Okay, so what I'm guessing here is default user warehouse, obviously for machine 1. There you go. So I haven't defined a default warehouse. That's okay. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to switch users for now where I know I do have a default warehouse. So there you go. It's part of setup. When we're defining the users here, and I'm just going to quickly show you because you're probably wondering, where has that come from? Why wasn't it picked up? So for example, if I was to look at the machine 1, for example, and edit that particular user, remember that users can have default warehouses. So for example, we need to make sure that this particular user, so we have they're not an admin, they're not an expense user, and we want to make sure that they've got all the relevant access, they've been approved. And what I can do there is I'll just, that's fine. And we'll just check as well on the default warehouse. And what I'll do there is I'll just update that to the general. This is where I mentioned about the assigned pick. So this is where you would have to switch on the assigned pick. And if I also come down here to production, there is the production options for that particular user. And if I go back up here to purchasing, item reordering. So if this user was signed in and you wanted them to look at the MRP run, you would have to switch on the item reordering. So let me just save that and we'll okay that. And if I go back to my production order, let me just drill back into that one there on the red bike, which you can see here at the top of the screen. And let me just edit that and switch the root user over to machine 1 now that we've updated the details, and it should now accept machine 1 because they have a default warehouse. And there we go, just to update that. So there you go. Setup is important and settings for the users are important to ensure that you follow through on the production itself. Now again, when we've added the production order, we get a lot of information. very similar to what we saw when we drilled into the red bike. So it's telling me there's 12 red bikes in stock, 13 committed already to customers. That's obviously on order, on sales orders. Minus one available to sell. We can produce minus 13 based on current raw materials. So very obviously, we need to get stock in. We need to get stock in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the MRP. I'm going to check my fulfillment for the red bike components. I'm going to switch this here to stock type for stock items. I have selected the product group as bike components. And the reason for that is I just want you to see the red bike. There's too many other items to bring in on screen. Destination warehouse. So if I generate some purchase orders, what warehouse am I going to receive them into? So you can specify what that warehouse is. Reorder to, and this is the one I mentioned already about the level to reorder to. Is it by reorder quantity? Is it by minimum stock? Because that could be more. Or is it by maximum? And I mentioned the minimum stock again around fast moving stock items. If you want to just look at items for specific suppliers. And then we come to the stock level. So this is important. So as well as looking at what's been allocated to sales orders and purchase orders, because it's important to see what we have on POs, because if it's a case that we don't need to fulfill the stock right now because maybe we're waiting on delivery already from a supplier, we need to be able to see that and understand that as well during the MRP process. But we also want to include raw materials committed to production, because I want to see for the components of all the bikes what we have committed to production. So let me just apply these filters and see what it reports back on. So I know, for example, all these top level ones here at the very top, these are all my general components, the chain, the pedal, the saddle, the handlebars, etc. So when I come over here, you can see there the on hand, I can see all the negative stock, very similar to what we saw already on the bill of material items. There isn't sufficient stock there. I can see if there's anything committed to sales orders or anything on purchase orders. Now, the great thing here is I have a quantity available on purchase orders already. So I know there's stock due in. So what I can do is I can obviously generate more purchase orders to receive in, more than I require at this point in time. It will tell me there, based on all of these stock totals, what the free stock will be. So I'll be able to say, okay, great. So in fact, I'll have sufficient stock to maybe run a couple of runs, a couple of production runs once I get this stock in from that supplier, for example. But what I can do if I want to, for example, add the suggested reorder quantity to the reorder quantity, I can tick this box here and it will automatically populate a value here to bring in the reorder quantity. Or what I can do is, let me just select, we just maybe update maybe one of these items here. I'll just put in a quantity for each of these just to put them in, just so we can see those come in to the system. And just to show you here that once we have a reorder quantity in, you'll be able to select the relevant components and then simply create the purchase order. Something went wrong. Okay, that's okay. If I selected something more, okay, let me just take that off for a second and take that off as well. Let me just apply the filters again. Okay, let me just update those and update that again. We'll just maybe even take the first two lines. Okay, we'll just wait for that to refresh. Might just have to refresh that line for a second. Okay, just let that come back on screen. A little bit slow there. Let me just apply filters. We're actually looking at the BOM item. Let me just do that again. Okay, so we're back to here. So for example, if we just, what I'll do is I'm just going to take a couple of lines there just for example, and I'll just select those two lines. And if we just try and create a purchase order for those, okay, something's gone wrong. This has worked this morning because there's a list of purchase orders that have been added, but the idea here is might just be to do it. My data might have changed since then. A lot of people work on the same demo data a lot of the time, but the idea here is that you can generate a list of all the requirements, look at the current production run, look at the current raw materials that are already committed to production to see if based on the free stock you're going to have sufficient stock to complete a production run. And it's the whole idea around MRP that you can generate the required purchase orders to receive in that stock. So what I'm going to do is, in order for us to complete the production run, I do have a purchase order that I generated this morning just to show you that. And you can see there it was created document on the item reordering screen. So you can see that it even gives me a remark to confirm that it was generated as a result of the item reordering. So this is the one that I did previously, one I made earlier, as they say, in baking. So you can see there a list of all of the components that were automatically generated as a result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those to a goods receipt. I want to receive in those raw materials, and then we'll review the production order again to see where we are in relation to completing the production run. So let me just save that to complete that delivery. So now let's just go back and look at that same production order again. And if we drill into that particular production order, just so that we can see the details, and it's just going to update the stock information now at the top. So it's still telling me we've got 5 based on production orders. Let me just go in there again and refresh that. So it's still telling me just the 5. Okay, so that hasn't just refreshed and updated. We'll do that again. That's okay. So let me just show you then what happens on the production orders grid itself. So for example, if I want to plan that in for or schedule that in for production. So if I look here at the planned start date and planned end date, you can see there that because we didn't put in a planned date, it's NA, it's blank. But when I click on this directly from the grid itself, it will give me an option to schedule this in the resource planner. So you can see there, add to resource planner. So if I click on the below, I can then add this to the resource planner. I can specify the date, the time, the machine and the user, or I can do it directly from the planner itself by clicking and dragging. So this is production order number 39. If I go to the resource planner itself, and I mentioned about selecting your users, and you can see here I've just selected myself, but what I'm also going to do is I'm going to select machine 1 so we can see both at the same time. I can click here on the calendar view to specify my start and end dates of the time of the day itself, for example. So if the day starts at 7 in the morning, let's just bring it to 7 in the morning. And maybe production run does finish at 11 at night, but we can maybe just bring that back again, maybe to 8 o'clock at night. Cell duration, half an hour. The row height, I can look at it in a timeline day view, whether it's by day or week. So all of the different views can be applied. I can also look at the filters. So these are the different colors and customizations that I mentioned to you as well from the very, very start. So you can see there when something is open, it's green. When it's closed, it's red. And you can see there a different color allocated to the different transaction types. So I could change the color here for production and make it a different color altogether. So what I'm now going to do is plan orders. So what we should see here on the the right-hand side is a list. Let me just come out of that again and just go back to, and switched all the icons again on me. So let's just go here to the planned production orders, and there's the 39. So maybe I want that to start, maybe just make sure that we have today's date and 2026, and we're in February, and we're on the 18th, for example, and we could schedule that even for the 19th to kick off tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just going to click and drag that in there for the machine. And in fact, I'm also going to drag that because in fact, it's going to take about 4 or 5 hours to complete the production. So what you can see there, all I'm doing there is clicking and dragging on the end of the scheduler just to lengthen out the time that's required for that particular production process. And of course, if I had other production orders that were running alongside it, for example, on the same machine and maybe starting at a different time, you can see here where the height will come in. So in fact, I might just want to put that in there for machine 1 as well. Maybe there's another production stage that has to happen at 9 o'clock. So when that kicks off at 8 o'clock in the morning, there might be something else that has to happen at 9, and that's on the same machine, or it might be for another user or an engineer or a different machine. So I get to see the visibility then across the resource planner itself. So lots to take on board. I appreciate I've gone over time as always again. Lots to take on board about utilising the production process. I have previous recordings there, of course, around the production process and how to utilise all of the different functionalities. Might just quickly check and see if there's any questions that have come in yet from anybody. And of course, if there's anything that you need to ask us, always reach out to the support on the chat. And of course, information will always get back to myself or your consultant for your site as well, particularly if this is something that is going to be new for you to get up and running. If you have a consultant allocated to you as well, you will get to ask all of the relevant questions to ensure everything is in place. So let me just quickly check to see if any questions. Yeah, so can it work if materials are on order but have not yet arrived? So you've ordered from your supplier and they haven't yet arrived. So no, you won't be able to make, you'll have insufficient stock to make. You'll be able to do the production. You'll be able to maybe schedule in the production process, but obviously without the physical stock being there, the raw materials to support the production process. But you will be able to schedule it in. You will be able to, as you can see there, this particular production order that I added in is pending and I didn't have sufficient stock to add it in. So yes, you can add it in, leave it as pending, and then move it through the status changes once the stock becomes available. Absolutely. Okay, super. Guys, oh, yep. It would be helpful if a production time can be entered in the BOM to calculate the time. So the overall time it's taken for the production run, I guess that's where the scheduled start and end time. So that is recorded here. So I've just populated that there for that particular production order number 39. Let me just go back to the grid. What you can see here, yeah, it doesn't say 5 hours and 20 minutes. I think that's what you're looking for, just to be able to see the time that's been consumed on the production itself. That's a great idea to see it even here on the grid. You can see here the planned times and dates, and I might drill in now to that particular production number itself, just to show you to you while we're answering the question, I guess. So yeah, what it does is it's planned end, date and time. It doesn't show you the overall time consumed, like whether that's 5 hours or 6 hours consumed on the production planning itself. But that's not to say you can't record it, of course, on the custom fields momentarily, just even right now at this moment. You could record it on the custom fields to have it there. Yes, so if it had a cycle time, then this would help greatly. Yeah, so I understand there. Yeah, exactly. 5,000 units, 30 seconds each. Yeah, it's actually similar to something that we're putting in place around lead times and stock. So like the cycle. of how long it takes stock to come in around lead times. So that's a great suggestion. So I'll bring back those questions and answers back to the team, because it is something that we are looking to improve at all times. It is something we are going to be able to do around the lead times. That is something we are bringing in this year. So if there's something on order that we can understand how quickly we normally get it into stock before we obviously set something into process for the production itself. But it would be nice to see the visibility around the production order as well, to understand the time and the number of units for that. Yeah, I'll bring that to the table for consideration. Great. Thank you so much as always. I appreciate, I've run over on time, and I tend to do on these particular sessions, but I appreciate you all taking the time out. Yeah, our machines separate user licenses. So I kept mentioning about root user, machines, and user. They are not separate. It's the same as a user license. So a machine is a user license. It's exactly the same. Yeah. So you simply just define what you saw the machine. I had it defined as a user in user settings. So that is a license that then is consumed as well. Perfect. Great. Okay, that's super. Thank you so much for those questions. And as I said, I will review them, and I will certainly bring those back to the table and ensure that you, if there's anything further that we can give to you on those in a future update, we certainly will. Thank you so much as always for staying on board and for taking the time out of your day to listen in on the current lesson. And I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson, and you will find access to the recording as always, probably later on today in the afternoon. You'll be able to see it on the website. Super. Thank you so much as always, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson. Take care.